Okay, so this question was an overlap between the foundation and higher paper, and it's question 15 on the foundation paper and question 7 on the higher paper. Again, it's about waves, and we start off with a question that comes up a lot, and you'll see in the two follow-up questions there's a slightly different version of this question at the start both times, so it's really important that you understand this. So, sound and light are different types of waves, give 2 similarities and 2 differences, and clearly the 4 marks here, you're going to get 1 mark for each similarity and 1 mark for each difference. The similarities in some ways are much harder, and what you need to do is to think about the fact that they are both waves, and therefore anything that a wave can do, sound and light can do. Now you will have covered all of these things listed here: reflection, refraction, diffraction. You may have talked about interference. You should certainly know that all types of wave, no matter what they are, transfer energy from one place to another. And then another possibility is they exhibit this thing called the Doppler effect. The most obvious ones there are the transfer of energy and the fact that they can be reflected, probably. There are other things that you can do. It says that they can both travel through particular solids, liquids or gases. The obvious one is air. You know that sound and light waves travel through air. For some reason, you can kind of see why, because it's not really related to physics, it's more to do with biology. Ignore reference to senses in similarities and differences. Lots of people put that sound waves were detected with your ears and light waves with your eyes. Try and stick to the things that sound waves and that sound and light waves are, or that sound and light waves can do. Right? What are they and what can they do? And the main things they can do are listed in there. So you just need to learn that list. Okay. So the differences then is somewhat easier. The obvious one, I think, is that light can travel through a vacuum, and sound cannot travel through a vacuum. You may have seen in Key Stage 3 in Year 8 a demonstration with a bell jar. You pump the air out of the bell jar, you can't hear the bell ringing anymore inside it. Okay, they have vastly different speeds or velocities. That's another one. Okay, sound travels about 330 meters per second in air, and light about 300 million meters per second, so light is considerably faster, and you don't need to remember the numbers necessarily. It says except light is faster than sound. You can remember that one is longitudinal and one is transverse, and in fact, if you just said that, that's fine. You don't need to actually match up with which is which. However, if you matched it up and got it the wrong way round, if you said sound is a transverse wave, where the oscillations are at right angles to the energy transfer, and light is longitudinal, where the oscillations are in the same direction as the energy transfer, then you did get that mark wrong. Okay. You are also allowed what type of wave it is. Sound is a mechanical wave because there's actual physical substance moving, and light, there is no physical substance vibrating. It's an electromagnetic vibration that's happening. That one again is probably way down the list of sensible ones. The two most obvious ones are at the top here. Light can travel through a vacuum, sound can't, and they have vastly different speeds or velocities. Just to go back for a sec, just to note this point at the top of the mark scheme, it says read the whole answer to ensure there are no contradictory statements which negates that mark. What that means is that if you've said something correct, but then you've said something later on that disagrees with that and is incorrect, then you don't get the mark for that point. Okay? So if you said something like sound waves are longitudinal and light waves are transverse, and that's a difference, between the two, and then you said further down something like light waves are longitudinal, then that cancels out that correct statement made before. So be careful that you're not losing marks by sort of trying to say too many things and getting mixed up. Try and keep it clear. Okay, 4 bullet points for 4 marks is all you need to do to answer that question. Right, then it moves on to talk about an experiment. So there's a microphone with the sound wave travelling through a tank with some liquid in it, from the loudspeaker. Okay, and we get some results. So 5 unknown liquids, and the first thing it asks you to do is to do a calculation here. It says, gives you the information. You should be looking here, underline the keywords, right? So you should underline frequency, you should underline wavelength, calculate the wave speed, and it says use the correct equation from the physics equation sheet. There is a physics equation sheet in your booklet, okay, and pretty much always for this paper, it's going to be the last one, because the last physics equation, the one that deals with waves, is the only one that is relevant to the sections of the syllabus you're being tested on. Okay, so we are using that wave speed equals frequency times wavelength, so you literally put the frequency in, multiply it by the wavelength, and you get 1200 meters per second. Here, note, they've given you the units, meters per second, but very often they will not, so it's worthwhile learning which units go with which quantities, and because this is a speed, if you use standard units you will get an answer in meters per second. And then all you need for the third mark is to find 1200 on the diagram. So we go up and look at this graph here and see speed of sound 1200, read across until we get to liquid C is the one that has to be the answer. So make sure you're using the diagram. Some answers put a specific liquid down as if you were supposed to remember what the speed of sound was in particular liquids. There's no way they're going to get you to remember that. Okay, nowhere does it say you have to learn it. So this is all about using the information you're given sensibly. And the last part of the question is asking you to describe or to think about a link or a hypothesis. This is just like you do in your ISA. Just like in your ISA, you get a hypothesis, there is a link between density of a liquid and the speed of sound in the same liquid, and some results. So this is exactly the same skills. Okay? Use the information in the table to decide whether the student's hypothesis was completely correct or not. Now, the important thing here is to note that in this particular case, it doesn't matter whether you answer yes or no. And the reason is there is one clear thing that supports the hypothesis and one exception. Alright? They've even been nice to you and arranged these liquids in order of density. Now, we don't really care about the name of the liquid, because if we look at the hypothesis and we look at the two variables, we should underline density of liquid and speed of sound. Those are the two variables. And the density of the liquid is the independent variable, the speed of sound is the dependent one. We are changing the liquid and therefore the density on purpose and measuring the speed of sound. So if you look, the density is increasing at every point on this in this table, and the sound is also increasing at every point until the last one we get to mercury. So, first point then, speed increases as density increases. Remember, it's much better to describe a trend than to just talk about individual points. If you want to talk about individual points, describe the trend first. So as density changes, this is how speed changes, and then support it with data from the table. And the last point is that the mercury, because it has a much higher density, should have had a much higher speed of sound, but it doesn't actually have a higher speed of sound. It has a lower speed of sound than water. Okay, so mercury does not fit the pattern or is an anomaly. And the 2 marks there, you have to mention both of those no matter what answer you've given.